All right, so you know we love to dig into these company documents.
Absolutely.
And you've given us a big stack of papers here all about Unimech Aerospace and Manufacturing Limited.
Yes, a fascinating company.
Yeah, they're getting ready for their IPO, so we've got the prospectus, financials, industry reports,
You've got the whole shebang.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And we're going to cut through all this and figure out, is this a good investment or not?
Well, one of the things that jumps out at me immediately is the kind of parts they make.
Okay.
These aren't simple nuts and bolts.
Right.
This is highly specialized stuff they're doing.
Ooh, like what?
We're talking like intricate tooling, complex electromechanical assemblies.
Okay.
This is the kind of stuff that goes into, aircraft engines,
Wow.
gas turbines, even nuclear power plants.
So high-stakes stuff.
Yeah, absolutely critical components.
And to add to that, it looks like over 90% of their business comes from exports.
That's right.
Big clients in the US, Germany, the UK.
Truly global company.
So they've got a foothold in a pretty demanding market.
Definitely.
So what are we doing today? What's the mission?
Well, I think we needed to really understand Unimech's business.
Okay.
How does this company work? What are its strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah.
Do they have what it takes to really succeed as a public company?
Because that's what it comes down to, right?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, is this a smart investment?
That's what we're here to find out.
So we'll look at their business model, their growth potential, and the risks they're facing.
All of that.
Let's start with the basics. How do they make money?
Sure.
I saw in the documents they talk about a dual capability model.
Yes.
Build to print and build to specification.
Right. Two different approaches.
Break it down for me. What does that mean?
So build to print is basically like working off a blueprint.
Okay.
So a client comes to them with a very specific design.
Right.
And Unimech manufactures it to those exact specifications.
So they need to be very precise.
Extremely precise.
Okay, what about build to specification?
So that's more collaborative. Unimech works with the client to actually design the part.
So it's not just manufacturing, it's problem solving too.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
They're finding solutions.
That dual capability seems like a good thing.
It is a real advantage.
Opens up their client base.
Absolutely makes them more adaptable.
Now, I did see one thing in the documents that makes me wonder about their scalability.
Okay.
I saw that it can take up to 3 years to onboard a new client.
Wow. 3 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, is that a red flag or just how this industry works?
I think it's a reflection of the industries they operate in.
Okay.
Aerospace, defense, nuclear energy.
Yeah.
You can't cut corners.
Right.
The standards are extremely high.
For good reason.
For good reason. A faulty part in an airplane
Yeah.
could be catastrophic.
So all those audits and certifications,
It all takes time.
they need to be sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a long process, but it also creates a barrier to entry
I see.
for competitors.
Okay.
So once they have a client, that relationship tends to last.
Okay, now let's talk technology.
Right.
I keep seeing this phrase, digital manufacturing system.
Yes.
Am I picturing robots running the factory?
Well, not quite robots, but
Okay.
it is very sophisticated.
What are they doing?
They use an advanced ERP system,
Okay.
and that tracks every single stage of the manufacturing process,
Really, from start to finish.
from the initial design to assembly and delivery.
So how does that affect their efficiency and quality control?
Well, it's all about transparency and control.
I
They
mean,
can track every component, monitor progress, identify bottlenecks.
so they can catch problems early.
Exactly, before they even become problems.
That level of precision must be a big selling point,
It is, especially in aerospace.
where the tiniest error could be a big deal.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like a smart investment.
It is. It gives them a competitive edge.
So we're seeing how they work, what makes them unique.
Yeah,
But let's get to the numbers.
right?
Their financials show some really impressive revenue growth.
They do.
I'm looking at a 314% increase in profit from
Right.
2022 to 2024.
That is huge.
Is that kind of growth sustainable?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
What are they doing to keep it going?
They've got a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, tell me more.
First, they're planning to increase capacity at their facilities in Bangalore,
Okay,
both the one in Pina and the one in the special economic zone near the airport.
got it. And I also saw they're planning to use a big chunk of the IPO money
Yes.
to buy new machinery and equipment.
Right, the significant investment.
What are they getting and how does it fit into their growth plan?
So we're talking some serious heavy hitters here.
Okay.
5-axis CNC machining centers,
Okay.
vertical turning lathes, cylindrical grinding machines.
That sounds expensive.
It is, but it's state-of-the-art.
Help me out. I'm no engineer. What do these machines do?
They allow Unimech to produce really complex parts
Okay.
with incredibly tight tolerances.
Okay.
The more axes a CNC machine has,
Yeah.
the more intricate the shapes it can create.
So it's not just about quantity.
It's about capability.
They can make even more specialized parts.
Exactly.
So they're doubling down on that specialization.
It's a bold strategy.
But it makes sense if that's where the demand is.
Exactly. They're anticipating future needs.
Okay, let's talk about the risks.
All right.
The thing that jumped out at me was their reliance on just a few customers.
Yes, that's a concern.
Their top 10 customers account for over 95% of their revenue.
That's a lot of eggs in one basket.
What happens if one of those big clients goes away?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
How so?
On the one hand, those strong relationships provide stability,
Steady income.
but it also creates a vulnerability.
Okay.
What if a major client reduces orders or has financial difficulties?
Yeah, their business could take a hit.
Exactly.
So diversification is important.
It's key.
They mentioned wanting to expand their customer base,
They did.
but they weren't very specific.
We'll have to see how they plan to do that.
Another risk is operating in these highly regulated industries.
Yes, we touched on that with the onboarding process.
But it goes beyond that, right?
It does. It's about compliance.
What kinds of complexities are we talking about?
Navigating a whole web of regulations, certifications, audits,
Wow.
and the penalties for non-compliance can be severe.
Like what?
Fines, even losing licenses to operate.
So they need to be very careful.
Absolutely meticulous in every aspect of their operations.
It sounds expensive.
Compliance is an ongoing challenge.
So it's a big part of their risk management.
It has to be.
Now, here's something else that worries me.
What's that?
Their longer gestation period.
Okay.
There's a gap between getting an order and getting paid.
Right.
How does that affect their finances?
Well, essentially, they're financing their operations during that gap,
Okay.
which puts a strain on cash flow.
I
You
see.
need to have enough working capital.
To cover those costs.
Exactly.
While still being able to invest in growth.
It's a balancing act.
So managing their money carefully is super important.
They can't afford a cash crunch.
Speaking of money, let's look closer at their financials.
Okay.
We talked about their revenue growth.
Right. Impressive numbers.
But what about profitability? Are they making money efficiently?
Their gross profit margins are actually quite good,
Okay, good to hear.
around 70%.
So they're managing costs well.
Yes, and pricing their products competitively.
That's a good sign.
It is.
I also noticed they have a subsidiary.
Oh, yes. Unimech Aerospace Toolings.
What's the deal with that? What do they do?
They're a key part of Unimech's expansion strategy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They have a dedicated facility in the Bangalore Aerospace SEZ,
Okay.
and they focus on even more complex components.
So it's like a specialized division.
Exactly. Pushing the boundaries.
So they can increase capacity without overstretching their current resources.
Right, and tap into new markets.
Makes sense.
It's a strategic move.
All right, let's break down the IPO itself.
For sure.
What are they planning to do with all this money they're raising?
Well, the bulk of it will go towards capital expenditure.
Okay, the new machines and equipment we talked about.
Right. They need to boost their capacity and capabilities.
Right.
They'll also use some of it for working capital
Okay.
for both Unimech and Inimech.
Makes sense.
And, of course, they'll allocate some to repay existing borrowings.
So reducing their debt?
Exactly, strengthening their balance sheet.
So it's a mix of investing in growth and managing their finances.
It's a balanced approach.
What about the offer size and the lock-in period for promoter shares?
Okay, so the offer size tells us about their ambitions.
Okay, how so?
They're aiming to raise a lot of capital.
So big plans.
Yes, aggressive growth plans.
What about the lock-in period? What's that about?
So that's the period that the founders can't sell their shares.
I see, and that's good for investors.
It's a sign of commitment.
Okay, so they're in it for the long haul.
It seems that way.
Okay, we've covered their business model, their growth strategy, the risks they face.
And the IPO details.
But none of this matters without the right people at the top.
Dude.
So let's talk about the management team.
All right, the people in charge.
Who are the key figures leading this company?
Okay, well, at the top you have Mr. Anil Kumar Putin.
Okay.
He's the chairman and managing director.
Okay, what's his background?
He's an engineer with over 25 years of experience in aerospace.
Wow, he's been in the industry a long time.
He founded Unimech back in 2016.
So he's seen it grow from the beginning.
He's the driving force behind their success.
So he's got the technical expertise and the entrepreneurial spirit.
Definitely a visionary leader.
Who else is important on the leadership team?
Well, there's Mr. Manny Putin and Mr. Pritam Shimoga.
Okay.
They're both whole-time directors and promoters.
And what do they bring to the table?
They have a wealth of experience in engineering and operations,
Okay.
which is crucial for a manufacturing company.
Right. And what about the financial side of things?
So that's where Mr. Ramakrishna Kamoshala comes in.
Okay.
He's the director and chief financial officer.
So he's the numbers guy.
Exactly. He oversees their financial strategy and reporting.
Very important role, especially as a public company.
Absolutely.
And I can't forget the CEO.
Of course, Mr. Rajanakanth Ballarman.
What's his expertise?
He's got years of experience in sales and marketing,
Okay.
which will be crucial for their expansion plans.
So they've got a mix of technical, financial, and sales and marketing experience.
A well-rounded team.
But can they actually do it? Can they lead Unimech to success?
That's the million-dollar question.
Their track record looks good,
He does.
but leading a private company is different from a public one.
Very different.
They'll face more scrutiny,
More pressure.
and they'll have to answer to a lot more people.
It's a whole new ball game.
It'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
Definitely.
Okay, we've got a sense of the team,
Yeah.
but they're not operating in a vacuum.
Right. We need to look at the bigger picture.
The industry landscape.
Exactly. Who are their competitors?
Yeah, how do they stack up?
What are their strengths and weaknesses?
So who are they up against?
Well, in the Indian market, they're competing with companies like Dynamatic Technologies Limited,
Okay,
M-Tier Bar Technologies Limited,
got it.
and Paris Defense and Space Technologies Limited.
So these are big players.
They are well established in aerospace and defense.
So what makes Unimech different?
Well, their dual capability model is a big differentiator.
Okay.
They can cater to a wider range of client needs.
Right, that flexibility.
And their digital manufacturing gives them an edge in terms of efficiency and quality control.
Makes sense?
And of course, their export focus positions them well for global demand.
Okay, so those are their strengths. What about their weaknesses?
Well, as we said, their reliance on a few key customers.
Yeah, that concentration risk.
They need to diversify.
And they're also a relatively young company.
They are, compared to some of their rivals.
So they've got a lot to prove.
They do. They need to show they can sustain this rapid growth.
Now, I saw something about a China +1 strategy in some of the industry reports.
Ah, yes, that's an interesting trend.
Can you explain what that is and how it might affect Unimech?
So China +1 refers to companies wanting to move their supply chains away from China.
Okay. Why is that happening?
Well, there are geopolitical risks, trade tensions,
I see.
and companies want to reduce their dependence on a single source.
So this is creating opportunities for other countries.
Exactly like India.
So how does Unimech fit in?
Well, they're already strong exporters,
Okay.
and they have a reputation for high quality.
So as companies look for new suppliers,
Unimech is well positioned to step in.
it's a potential advantage.
It is, but they still need to capitalize on it
They need to market themselves effectively.
and prove they can meet the needs of those global clients.
Okay, so it's an opportunity, but not a guarantee.
Exactly. They need to execute their strategy well.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've looked at Unimech's business model, their growth, their competitive landscape.
And the risks and opportunities they face.
But this is just the beginning.
There's still more to explore.
In the next part, we'll dig even deeper into their financials and their management team
And the overall industry dynamics.
to help you decide if Unimech is the right investment for you.
It's all about making informed decisions.
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive.
Stay tuned. So, before we move on, I think it's important to emphasize that Unimech's management seems really aware of this whole China +1 trend.
Yeah, they definitely see it as a big opportunity.
They're optimistic about it.
But, at the end of the day, it's not just about external factors.
Right.
A company's success really comes down to its internal strength.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some of Unimech's core strengths.
Okay.
We talked about that dual capability model.
Yeah, that's more than just a buzzword.
Right. It really sets them apart.
It does. It gives them that flexibility.
They can handle those big standardized orders,
Where precision is key.
but they can also pivot to those more customized projects.
Right, the problem-solving stuff.
It's a unique combination,
It is technical expertise and collaborative problem-solving.
which is really valuable in these industries.
Absolutely, where specific requirements are so important.
And then there's their embrace of technology.
Right.
It's not just about having fancy machines.
No, it's about how they use them.
That digital manufacturing system seems to be a real game changer.
It is, especially for quality control.
They're exporting most of their products
They're 90%.
to clients who demand the highest standards.
And they can't afford any mistakes.
Not even the slightest slip-up.
So that digital system helps them ensure that every single component
Yeah.
meets those international standards.
It probably gives those clients peace of mind, too,
It does.
knowing that their orders are being tracked.
And that everything is being checked in real time.
Transparency builds trust.
Absolutely.
Another strength I see is their deep understanding of the industries they serve.
Right. They're not just making generic parts.
No, they're embedded in the world of aerospace and defense.
Semiconductors, nuclear energy.
They've been operating in these niche markets for years.
They know the challenges.
They speak the language.
It's like they're not just a vendor.
Yeah, more like a partner.
A partner who understands the nuances of each sector.
Okay, so we've talked about some strengths now. Let's look at potential weaknesses.
Right. The flip side.
We already mentioned their reliance on a small number of customers.
Yes, that concentration risk.
It's something they'll need to address.
Diversification is crucial.
They talk about expanding their customer base,
They do.
but the details were a bit vague.
I'll have to see how they execute that.
Another potential weakness is their reliance on imported materials.
Right. A lot of companies in India face that.
How much does that expose them to global supply chain disruptions?
Well, it's definitely a factor.
Or currency fluctuations?
Those things can impact their costs.
And their profit margins?
They need to have strategies to manage those risks.
Like what?
Maybe exploring alternative sources within India,
Okay.
hedging against currency swings, or building stronger relationships with suppliers to lock in stable pricing.
So they need to be proactive.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about the bigger picture for a minute.
The industry landscape.
What are some of the key trends shaping these sectors?
And how might those trends affect Unimech?
Let's start with aerospace.
Right.
We're seeing air travel bouncing back after the pandemic.
It is recovering,
And that's driving demand for new aircraft.
which means more demand for the parts Unimech makes.
So they're riding that wave of recovery.
They are.
And it's not just passenger travel.
No, the defense sector is also growing.
Globally,
Globally, geopolitical tensions and modernization programs are fueling demand.
for advanced weaponry and equipment,
And Unimech is well suited to supply those critical components.
with their precision engineering expertise.
Exactly.
So two growth areas right there, aerospace and defense.
Right.
What about semiconductors and energy?
So semiconductors are booming right now.
I've heard that.
The demand for electronics is just incredible.
Everything from smartphones to electric vehicles.
All of that driving growth
And Unimech could be a part of that.
with their ability to make those tiny, intricate components.
So they could carve out a niche in that market.
It's a huge opportunity.
What about energy? What's happening there?
So the energy sector is transforming.
In what way?
There's a big push for renewable energy.
Solar and wind power.
But traditional sources like nuclear power are also getting more attention.
Because of energy security concerns.
Right. People want reliable power.
It's a complicated landscape.
It is, for sure.
So how does Unimech navigate that?
Well, they're already supplying parts for gas turbines and nuclear plants.
Okay.
And that demand is likely to stay strong,
At least for now.
so they could benefit from the energy transition.
Even as things shift towards renewables.
Exactly.
So they're not just riding existing trends.
They're also poised to benefit from emerging trends.
That's exciting from an investment standpoint.
It is.
But let's be realistic. We need to talk about valuation.
Ah, yes, the big question.
How much is Unimech actually worth?
That's a complex question.
It is. How do we even begin to figure that out?
Valuation involves looking at a lot of factors.
Like what?
Their financials, their growth prospects, industry dynamics.
It's not just about the numbers, though, right?
No, there's a bit of art to it.
And market psychology.
Exactly.
So what should investors be looking at when it comes to Unimech's valuation?
Well, the offer size and the price band will be,
Okay.
they're trying to raise a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And the market will ultimately decide how much they're worth,
It's supply and demand.
basically.
Investors will weigh the risks and opportunities.
Compare Unimech to its peers.
And decide what they're willing to pay.
Exactly.
What are some of the metrics they should be looking at?
Well, we talked about gross profit margins,
Right, as a measure of efficiency.
but they'll also want to consider things like return on equity,
Okay.
which shows how well they're using shareholder investments
And the debt-to-equity ratio.
to see how much debt they have.
And they'll want to compare Unimech's valuation to other companies in the industry.
Using metrics like price-to-earnings ratio and price-to-book ratio.
So a lot of numbers to crunch.
There are.
But it's about understanding what those numbers mean.
What they tell us about the company's health and potential.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in the second part.
We have
Unimech's strengths and weaknesses.
the industry trends.
And even touched on valuation.
It's a lot to take in.
But remember, this is just a starting point.
It is just a starting point.
It's meant to give you the information you need
to begin your own research.
In the final part, we're going to shift the focus to you.
To the investor.
We'll talk about the things you need to consider,
Before making a decision about Unimech.
like your own investment goals and risk tolerance.
And the importance of doing your own due diligence.
We'll also offer some final thoughts on Unimech's potential.
And explore some questions to help you make a more informed decision.
Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Unimech Aerospace and Manufacturing Limited.
Now we spent a lot of time, looking at their business model and their growth strategy.
We talked about the competition.
But industry trends.
We even got into some of those complex financial metrics.
You did.
But now let's shift gears and talk about you.
You, the investor.
Because at the end of the day,
It all comes down to this.
does this investment make sense for you?
That's the key question.
So what are the things you need to consider before making a decision about Unimech?
Well, first and foremost, you need to think about your own investment goals
Okay.
and your risk tolerance.
Right.
What are you looking for? Are you hoping for quick short-term gains?
Right.
Or are you more interested in long-term growth?
Because those are two very different approaches.
They are, and every investment carries some level of risk.
And IPOs can be especially volatile.
That's right. They can be a bit of a roller coaster.
So some investors might be really excited about Unimech's growth potential.
Yeah, they're in those exciting industries like
Yeah.
aerospace and defense.
And that China +1 trend we talked about could really work in their favor.
But other investors might be more cautious.
Because they're so reliant on just a few big clients.
And those highly regulated industries can be tricky.
So it's all about finding the right fit.
Exactly. Your investment strategy needs to align with the company and your own comfort level.
And speaking of comfort levels,
Yes.
there's that section in the prospectus that no one ever wants to read.
Oh, you mean the risk factors?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not exactly light reading.
But it's so important.
It is. You have to understand the risks.
Because Unimech lays out all the potential challenges they could face.
Everything from competition to economic downturns.
Regulatory changes, even natural disasters.
They have to cover all the bases.
It really makes you think.
It should.
It's not just about getting caught up in the hype.
Right. You need to see the full picture.
And that brings us to another crucial factor, the management team.
The people at the helm.
We talked about their experience and their track record.
Right. They seem solid on paper.
But it's also about their vision for the future.
Do their plans make sense?
Do they have a clear strategy?
Can they adapt to challenges?
Can they communicate effectively with investors?
Because leading a public company is a big responsibility.
It is. They need to be able to make those tough decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's zoom out again and think about the long-term outlook for Unimech.
Okay.
We talked about some positive trends.
Right. The industries they're in seem to be growing.
But what are your overall thoughts on their long-term prospects?
Well, there are definitely reasons to be optimistic.
Okay.
Those trends we talked about, the growth in aerospace and defense,
Semiconductor boom.
all of that could really benefit Unimech.
But there are always uncertainties.
Always.
Challenges we can't predict.
And the competition is always changing.
So it's not a sure thing.
It's not. It's never a sure thing.
That's why it's so important to look beyond the hype.
And really focus on the fundamentals.
Their financials, their strengths, their ability to execute their plans.
It's about separating the signal from the noise.
And I think that's a good reminder for all of us.
Absolutely.
This deep dive has been a great starting point,
It has.
but the real work begins now.
With your own research.
Don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Read the prospectus carefully.
Dig into the financials.
Explore different perspectives. Compare Unimech to its competitors.
Talk to industry analysts.
And most importantly, ask yourself those tough questions.
Does this investment make sense for you?
Do you believe in the management team?
Are you comfortable with the risks?
Investing is a personal decision,
It is.
and it's crucial to make informed choices.
Choices that align with your goals and your risk tolerance.
So we've given you the tools.
We have.
Now it's up to you to use them.
Do your research, think carefully, and make the best decision for you.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Unimech Aerospace and Manufacturing Limited.
I hope you found it helpful
We hope this has given you the insights you need to start your own research.
and make a more informed investment decision.
Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing.
So until next time, happy investing.